Hello and welcome back to Elden Ring and Rage Gaming. My name is Solo and today we are talking about this weapon right here, this giant great spear, Siluria's tree, which has been massively buffed in patch 1.07, which has changed my expectations of this weapon entirely. And it all comes down to its newly improved Ash of War, the Woe. With increased motion speed, attack power, and poise during activation, with added damage thanks to the weapon dealing damage as well, and the projectile now being able to penetrate enemies, this weapon's Ash of War is now actually viable and very relevant at that. Its DPS output has been hugely improved with the faster motion speed, and the poise during activation, well, that's hyper armor, meaning you can blindly trade with this Ash, be it the fast or slow version, in both PvE and PvP. Which, yeah, the Ash has two parts to it. You can slam quickly by tapping it like so, or you can charge it up to increase the damage and send out a ranged sort of projectile. Like I said, that projectile can now penetrate enemies, so you could line up foes and deal AoE now. And in PvP, the damage of this Ash can one-shot players, or leave most within an inch from death, while in PvE, it is just stupid how effective this thing is. Also, as a great spear, you've got a strong and effective moveset with big range, so this buff has really put Siluria's tree on the map. I'm very impressed by it, but now let's talk about it, starting with PvP. To get straight to the point on this then, yeah, it does a lot of damage, this Ash of War. It doesn't really matter whether it's the full charge blast or a quick tap slam, it's gonna hit like an absolute truck. From the buff, you have that hyper armor, meaning you can trade one way or another. Happy to take a hit if you're able to land the Ash in return. It does take a while though, so you might take 2 hits when doing it. I'm seeing roughly 1,500 damage or higher, even close to that with the fast tap weaker version. I was surprised that did so much. But basically, this is gonna one-shot plenty of players, or at most, in many cases, put them very low health. Maybe one spear attack at that will kill them. It's stupidly strong and effective if it lands, but obviously it has downsides. For example, the charge up range shot, that'll track perfectly with the lock on unless they're moving around, which most will, or say time a roll. You can free aim it, but it's definitely awkward to do so, since when done incorrectly, it'll just do a ground slam like the quick tap anyway. On that topic of the quick slam though, the range is tiny, meaning it needs to be a direct hit for it to actually land, or very close to glancing. I think that's fair enough considering it does stupid damage, but whether it's a fast tap or a full charge, if it lands, it's going to destroy the player that you're dealing with, which will definitely work really well in, say, invasion scenarios where people are often paying less attention in the open, especially where you can now penetrate targets, be it players or objects, leading to some cheeky potential if used smartly. Overall, I find the Ash of War buff massive for this weapon to make this Ash such an effective threat, but then there's still more to this weapon and build than just the Ash. As a great spear, it's got a great moveset. Your light attacks are always going to be these fast pokes with high range, and since it is a bigger weapon, it does hit pretty hard even then. You can combo that easily in multiple stabs, catching people in panic rolls, or when they stubbornly just keep trading into it. Meanwhile, your heavies will work as a surprise mix-up for, say, roll catching, and the good damage on that too. Maybe throw in a heavy after 1 or 2 lights, and that can catch people out. Obviously as well, with it being a great spear, it has that running heavy, which is insanely good, and is a massive gap closer. It's this sort of multi-part damage hit, where when you're running it ticks damage, and then with a final thrust, the main hit will land. It tracks really well though, you can almost turn a 180. Lastly, I want to mention the crouch or roll attack, which work well when someone's rolling around you to sort of change up your pace and do a sort of upward thrust. That combos really well into the Ash, but I think that's what's really strong about this weapon and moveset. All of the attacks are pretty quick and combo into the slower slam when you tap it, or the really slow charge that completely messes up people on the timing of their rolls and they're just not expecting it. But still, there's more to the build and options, as you can see. We have 2 incantations to synergize with our talisman of choice, that Godfrey icon that essentially enhances Ash of War charge attacks, but it will also enhance charge spells such as Giant's Flame and O Flame, which are 2 powerful incantations that benefit. Giant's Flame provides massive burst and this huge explosion radius. Great for quick range potential when needed, because you can just throw it out rather than charging it. Giant's Flame is surprisingly effective in free aim though, which is probably the best way to catch people with it, since they're trying to roll the explosion. You can throw it where they're going to end up on the roll. I actually faced a really clever build when using this build, one that made it so I couldn't target them. So in that case, Giant's Flame and the free-flowing explosions, they were clutch. The other incantation we have is O Flame, a more close range shotgun style burst of fire, which again can be charged. You can send it out quickly, you can combo it after some basic attacks, you can fully charge it or sprint charge it, so it's also a versatile and effective incantation to run. Overall, I found there really isn't a weak part to this build in PvP. You have both Giant's Flame and the Weapon Ash for ranged gameplay. You have outrageous trade potential due to the Ash's hyper armor and obvious high damage. So I'm very pleased with the build for PvP, but now let's talk about PvE, where it's actually better. So yeah, the Ash of War, when charged up, does so much damage, and it tracks on auto lock like in PvP, but these guys aren't sprinting around like a player. It's a boss. It's not really going to be able to avoid it. So you can easily spam this over 3k a shot charged Ash of War at reasonable range. Obviously, it's going to do more when they're weak to holy damage, so that's going to be incredible. The range, while far from infinite, is beyond medium range, so it is good for distance fighting or against big targets like the dragons. So you could play this build entirely ranged with the Ash of War and maybe Giant's Flame as well, but there's nothing wrong with getting in there up close and personal. The hyper armor is going to protect you completely as you blindly full charge over and over and tank hits, or just spam the tap. The fast cast still hits hard, slamming down the weapon fairly quickly with that holy explosion, dealing upwards of 2,000 damage in one quick hit. I found that worked best when, say, just rolling to avoid a hit, then doing a quick slam. The weapon itself will deal a bit of damage on the Ash as well, not just the holy explosion, and it can stagger bosses, particularly useful when you're close to capitalize on it, but if you're far away, you can just do another full charge range attack anyway. So honestly, you could play this build entirely about the Ash and nothing else in PvE, and it would still work really well. Obviously, there's still the great spear with its own quick moveset, the good range, the nice damage and all that, but everything's just so eclipsed by the Siluria's Woe Ash, it's crazy. Still, we do have options with the O-Flame and Giant's Flame, and if the enemy is weak to fire, these could be very good options all the same, especially Giant's Flame. That's one of the strongest incantations in the game. Naturally, we do have the charge up talisman to increase its damage, so it works well in this build. So you have two great types of damage. If they're weak to holy or they're weak to fire, you should be using that specific one. But there's not much more I can say about it. Your weapon and the moveset works well, the incantations are solid and synergized with the build, but the Ash of War is just crazy in PvE. I was not expecting it to be so strong. It's definitely shot the weapon up in my expectations, and I think this should be, for any strength faith build or player, a top tier pick. But now we come to the point where I should explain the build. We have a few things to point out. Starting with the equipment, we of course have Siluria's Tree as our weapon of choice, and then we have a seal to cast our incantations. If you are running higher faith, I wouldn't actually recommend the finger seal. Something like the Erd Tree seal or Golden Order seal would be better because they weigh nothing, and weight is a very important thing. In this patch, armor actually has a lot more poise tied to it, so heavier sets like the Crucible set is going to give you a lot more poise, so wearing heavier stuff is a good idea. Any little bit of weight that you can squeeze out for more posture is going to be good. On that note, I want to reference the Ice Crest shield you may have seen me running on my back in PvP. It's actually a really cool and potentially underlooked shield. The whole point of it is that it provides some extra status resistance. So as I pull it out, you can see I have frost and bleed resistance, meaning that it's harder to cause a bleed build-up on me and harder to pop a frost build-up on me when I've got the shield on, even if it's just on my back. So if you're dealing with a bleed build or a frost build, which are more common these days, it could be a good thing to have on your back. In any build, you can get away with the weight. On that shield, we have the Holy Ground Ash of War, just for some added healing and a sort of area of effect, which you could play some mind games with, maybe in an invasion, get that tick healing, and then do some range shots, forcing them to fight in your ground, forcing them to you. But now let's talk talismans. Obviously, we have the Godfrey icon. This is what's enhancing our charged spells and skills, so that obviously works really well with our charged Ash of War. And as I've mentioned, the charging of O-Flame or the charging of Giant's Flame Take Thee. It's going to enhance the power of these. Shadow of Alexander, obvious, massively important, going to boost the power of the Ash of War itself. In PvE, we can further increase the holy damage by running the Sacred Scorpion Charm, but I would never recommend this in PvP because of the damage negation. You could run something for poise, such as the Bull Goat's Talisman, or the Erd Tree's Favor for more health, more stamina, and importantly, a quick load to run more armor for more poise. Lastly, the Carrion Filigreed Crest is a great idea. It's going to reduce the FP consumed by your spamming of the Ash of War, which you will be doing a lot of, so it's a good idea. If you are using a lot of the incantation charging though, there is another talisman you could consider. The Radagon icon is going to shorten the spellcasting time, meaning you get to the peak max damage of those incantations quicker, so it's definitely something to know about. Lastly, for the Flask of Wondrous Physic, we've got the one that's going to improve our holy damage, obviously, but then also lead and hard tier, just to improve our trading, so we can spam that Ash of War and basically get away with more trades where we can. A quick look at my stats reveals what I'm running right now. One thing to note here is that the higher faith you have, apparently, it further increases the damage of your Ash of War. So you could drop some stats and go lower health or something else to get higher faith and make that Ash even stronger. But I found this was a healthy mix of the stats for me. Finally, for a quick look at my incantations, we have Golden Vow, of course, and Flame Grant Me Strength to increase our damage capabilities as well as some defense. When we pop the Flask of Wondrous Physic, that's going to give us our maximum AR when we're two-handing, so we can shoot up to 1,120 on just your basic hits, let alone the Ash itself. So there you have it. That is my glowing review of this weapon. It's genuinely fantastic. I'm really happy to see a weapon that was so underused and essentially irrelevant in the meta go from just nothing to something so strong and so special that I'm starting to see it fairly regularly in my duels. It's interesting to see how the base weapon didn't need any buffs. Its moveset was strong, the range is good. All they needed to do was make this Ash of War viable. The hyper armor was key. Adding to its damage and the motion speed was unexpected, but very appreciated. So I think it's in a really good place now, and I really recommend you try it if you're interested. But now though, that's the build though. I hope this was useful or interesting to you. If it was and you like these build videos, then let me know with a like so I can keep doing them. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.